This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Everyone's going quiet, so I think it means we're about to start. Welcome. What a beautiful turnout for a Monday night. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Charlotte Day and I'm the Director of Art Museums at the University of Melbourne. And I'm so pleased to welcome you this evening for a special alumni event. Coincidentally, Shanice and I are alumni too, so we're all in good company. So this is a kind of behind the scenes of 65,000 years, a short history of Australian art. We're extremely fortunate to have one of the curators with us, who I'll introduce properly in a minute. But this is a nice opportunity. Well, Shanice and I are used to doing this through the galleries and really like kind of taking people through. But like it can get quite complicated because it's been very busy and there's a lot of works to look at. So in a way, this is probably an opportunity to kind of distill the exhibition a bit more and focus in on some of the curatorial kind of background and decisions and the framework for it, and then you get to go over and have a good look after hours and experience it in your own time. So hopefully you get the best of both worlds. Can I just check how many people have seen the show already?
Oh, great.
Yes, good amount. We're very lucky because we've had an amazing return audience. We've been doing some research and we've had amazing return visitation for this show, which I think's quite exceptional. There's many exceptional things, which hopefully we'll get to. But firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Wurundjeri country, unceded land of the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and especially to all Indigenous First Nations people in the room, including my amazing colleague. This country we're extremely fortunate to be able to live, work, study, learn on this country, and to produce an exhibition like 65,000 Years, A Short History of Australian Art that connects our own immediate context with a much broader situating of Indigenous culture across Australia for millennia, maybe more than we can count. Marcia, she went with the 65,000 years, but you know, who knows what we'll think in another 20 years or so. We're very fortunate, and we could not do this work without approval and consultation with Wurundjeri, who were very involved in key decision making with this exhibition, which we'll touch on in a bit. And a special call out to Uncle Bill Nicholson, who worked with us. And when you go through the exhibition, I know a number of you have, but when you do, some of the early works that you experience and engage with are set up very specifically to ground us here where we are, because it's only through doing that that then we can actually engage in a respectful way with communities across Australia. Now I'm going to be like looking quite awkward at the PowerPoint that Shanice has very nicely prepared. Okay, so us, just a tiny bit of background. So I've been at the university only since 2023, so I have to do a disclaimer that I am not responsible for this show. I inherited it at the kind of tail end. Also the kind of building project and renovation of the Potter. So I came in much later than Shanice did. This project has been in the pipeline for potentially 10 years, we'd say, and started with an invitation from the chair of the Potter board, Peter Jopling, to distinguished Professor Marcia Langton to look at the university's collection, which a number of you will know. Well, the number goes around 18,000, I don't know. We haven't trolled through that number yet. We have to do a bit of work in that space. But there's very big art and related material collection. But when she looked into that collection, there's these incredible hotspots of activity and holdings of cultural and art material, but they're from particular places at particular times, often connected to anthropologists or to particular staff members of the university. And while they're incredibly important and we're very fortunate to be custodian of them, they could not tell a very complete story of Indigenous art in Australia. And I think the provocation from the very start for Marcia was that this is a big story to tell, rather than Indigenous art having to fit into a story of Western art history. Western art history should fit into a story of Indigenous art, which has been here for 65,000 years or more. So that's where the show originated. I'll introduce Shanisa now, who came. We might have to ask her how she got that gig as a recent graduate. It's a good story of a pathway, I'd say. So Shanisa, you were studying at the university and were brought on board with Judith Ryan, who'd been the curator of Indigenous art in GV in one form or another since the mid-70s. But you were brought on board 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2021 I came on board. So I was an art student here at the University of Melbourne, studied ancient world studies and anthropology. I was doing my honours over COVID, so 2020 and half of 2021. And yeah, while I was coming up to submit my thesis for that, I got the opportunity to hear about this project and ask if I wanted to come on board and learn how to curate. There's a large archival component for this exhibition, which we'll talk about. But I'd done a Students at Work internship at the Melbourne Uni Archives in 2018, I think it was. So because of that experience, my name had kind of got thrown into the mix. And then, yeah,
work experience, very important.
Yeah,
we
so
should
your work
never
experience,
underrate it. That's how I got my first job too. If you do well with your work experience, things can happen.
Yeah. So yeah, it all kicked off from there. I started in May of 2021, which is when Judith Ryan also came on board officially with the university.
So do you want to just say, like, at that point, what Marcia wanted from you and Judith, I suppose?
Yeah, so she kind of knew what she wanted this exhibition to be. She knew the title, so we knew it was 65,000 Years, A Short History of Australian Art. As you were saying, we had these real kind of hotspots in the collection, but we knew that there was a lot of other stories that weren't here in our collection and other stories we needed to tell in order to do this exhibition and the title justice. So we were brought on really to make lots of new acquisitions, which is always fun. So looking at new works, acquiring obviously very strategically, and then thinking about how we could kind of break down the themes that you'll see represented in each gallery to actually bring this exhibition to fruition.
You're really good at the stats.
Yes, all the stats.
So in terms of work, so it didn't end up being just works from the collection. So how did it end up kind of?
Yeah, so there's over 400 works of art in the exhibition and just under 50 archival documents. Of that total number, just over half is from the university's collection. So that's our art collection, our archives and the Medical History Museum here at the university. And then the other, I think it's 46%, are both from public and private lenders, which is a lot of negotiating that we had to do.
Some of those public lenders are probably works that have been seen, in different contexts quite often or recently.
Yeah.
But some of those private lender works are just not necessarily very accessible, or it was quite a lot of negotiation to get those works to be able to be shown. So we do stress that when we're in the exhibition, that some of this material you may not see again, or you've definitely not see it. Yeah, you won't get to see it in this kind of context.
Yeah. So it's a real amazing group of things that have been brought together.
Probably one of the perhaps like the most affecting experience, I think, is when people come in, particularly Palawa people, and see their ancestors in these amazing portraits on the wall, both by Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists. Yeah. And they may not have had that visual connection before. Yeah. That's, for me, has been probably one of the things that's been most nearly overwhelming, but it's actually happened many times, including from Indigenous university staff, but like from broader public. That's been one of the most amazing things. Yeah. Okay, but we're going to start with the start. Yeah. Okay. I was going to talk just extremely briefly, because we are about the show, just to say most of you will be familiar with the Potter Museum of Art. So there's a version of the Potter since the early 70s, one of the first public art galleries in Melbourne, and a really important one throughout its history. It shut in 2018 for a renovation because of COVID and all that blah blah that happened around that. That took longer than was anticipated, and then a new business case for renovation happened, and we've been able to open this year. So it took a bit longer than anticipated, but the idea of the renovation was to bring two buildings together. So the original Katsalitas building, now with the old physics building, which has been redesigned by Woodmarsh architects. And so it brings a beautiful new entry. It's very shiny. But what I like about this entry is, like, you know where the entry to the museum is. You don't have to, like, sneak, the other one was a bit discreet, and that end of Swanston Street's pretty hard these days. So you know where to come in. It's got a beautiful cafe, it's got amenities downstairs, lovely entry foyer so people can hang out, and just gives a very different feeling to coming into the space. So start with a much more social experience, which I think is important often, especially to people that might not feel that museums are their, comfort space. But then on the first level, we've got these amazing teaching spaces, studios we're calling them, which at the moment one of them's used in the exhibition, but next year there'll be the Primrose Potter space and the Peter Jopling studio, and they're going to be both used in our collection object-based learning program. So that's a big part of what we do, is that we use our collections to do teaching with students across the uni, across all faculties. And that's one of the distinctive things about the Potter. And so we're excited about re-energising that program that had already happened for the previous 10 years, but we feel like we can actually achieve a lot with it. If we can only change everyone to have one memorable experience with an art object during their time at uni, even if 10 years later they go, oh, gosh, I did that thing, that was kind of unusual, and they have some memory with that, it can change their relationship to the culture and the world around them without them even really realising. So I am a little bit of a...
Yeah, we love it.
We're a bit into that. Anyway, back to the show. Here's our three
just in case you don't know who Judith Ryan or Marcia Langton are. But yeah, the three of us have been working together pretty intensely since 2021 to pull this together. But yeah, this has been an idea since about 2016 when Marcia Langton was asked to curate this exhibition. So long time in the making.
And I think with the key thing to bring attention with Marcia, obviously a very senior Indigenous academic at the university, public spokesperson in Australia on many key concerns, but also very involved in the truth-telling project of the university, which now takes 2 volumes and seems like hasn't finished. So the idea with this exhibition is that it aligns and supports that, but it also takes a different shape. But to have the university itself doing truth-telling, which we will get to a bit later in more detail, is very important to us then being able to do the work we want to do in the right way. Because if we were calling it out, but it wasn't backed by the university, it would be much a lesser endeavour than this version of it can be. And we would have a different relationship to our work. Okay. We just want to do a call out that this project has 3 pillars, we call it. So it's the exhibition that you'll get to see. It's the book that I hope many of you have already seen. That came out later last year. We did that with Thames and Hudson. Shanisa was very involved in that. It's heavy when you hold it. The content is heavy too, but it's also beautifully written, has amazing scholarly research, but it's written in a way that is also accessible. The language, well, from my point of view, it's very well articulated in a way that is about trying to share this history with as many people as we can, so that people have a better understanding of where we've come through and the ideas that inform where we want to get to. So 6,000 print run, sold out or all distributed. We've got no more copies. But they've done 6,000 in Australia. It's like so big. Even like a novel That's the next success for like a major novel. Anyway, we're getting the new print run next week. So, maybe later this week.
Yeah.
So second print run, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So then the third pillar is this schools resources. So for Marcia, a big part of the educational remit for her was that it would also be about reaching out to younger Australians, and particularly school-age kids. So we've worked with NANGA, which is a part of the university, Indigenous educational unit in the university, and produce specific resources that connect to school curriculum. So they're not just like separate, so then it's really hard for teachers to kind of, use or absorb in their work, but it's like there for them to have reliable resources that are accredited, that have all the cultural permissions, so they've really got things that they can use and feel confident about. Yeah, and they're available online. You could go online yourself and have a look at them if you want.
So that's from grades 3 through to year 12, and then there's a tertiary pack as well. So
yeah,
and they'll obviously live on beyond the exhibition as well.
Both the book and
yeah.
And then I suppose the exhibition lives on in people after.
Yeah, you just have to see it enough times to remember it vividly in your minds.
Okay.
All right. So thinking about the exhibition's over 3 floors, for those that haven't seen it. So yeah, lots to make sure you try to get obviously to all of the floors, all of the rooms, but there's a lot to look at. So these are just how we've broken up each of the galleries. So thinking about how we kind of came to that curatorially, we started obviously with the collection we had here at the university. So lots of holdings from places like Arnhem Land, for example. So we had a whole gallery dedicated to that. And then thinking about all of the new works we were able to acquire and the other kind of strategic loans, we came up with this kind of breakdown, some of which is obviously very place-based, but others are more kind of thematic as well, thinking about broader themes that exist across different communities and different art traditions. So I thought, the plan, we were just going to go through kind of every space, give you some insides behind the scenes.
And it kind of starts off quite more chronological through first contact and early colonisation period, I suppose. But then, like you're saying, it goes into these particular movements and locations, and where it's really grounded in quite Victoria, and then it really reaches out as you move through the exhibition, which I think all of that was quite purposeful, wasn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we worked with amazing designers as well who were able to kind of help us curate this story for how you physically move through the building, which I think's been really effective as well.
And not being super chronological per se is also a way of decolonising like what art history is about, that it's not necessarily this that adds to that, and it's more about geographical places, families, communities, intergenerational knowledge sharing. Yeah.
So as you'll notice, a lot of the galleries kind of reflect either the place that those works were created in terms of, the colour palette on the walls or the architecture that we've embedded in that room. So every space is very different, but somehow it's all very cohesive at the same time, the whole exhibition.
And we say at the start always that while we've got a lot of history in this exhibition, it's about a continuum of practice. So tradition informs contemporary practice, but this is also about innovation and what people are making now. So it's not to look that something's separate from where we are now. It's all absolutely interconnected.
So with that, we obviously had this brand new space that had just been developed that we had no idea how we were going to use.
And couldn't access.
So we had no idea what this new foyer was going to look like. We'd seen renders and all of those things, but very different to being in a space in real life. But because it's obviously a much larger footprint than what the old kind of entry space used to be, we knew we had a lot of room to work with. But thinking about what we wanted people to encounter when they first kind of came into the exhibition, what was the first thing we wanted people to be seeing and thinking about when they come into, 65,000 years of short history of Australian art. And we really landed on, we wanted to acknowledge obviously the country that the university is on and that the Potter Museum of Art is on. So that's Wurundjeri. So we did a lot of work with Uncle Bill Nicholson in particular, as you noted, but the Wurundjeri Council as well, about this selection in the foyer, but also in the Victoria and Tasmania gallery. So also I didn't say in the stats, 6 new commissions for this exhibition as well. So this is one of them, which you can see up the back. All of the screens are work by Brett Levy, who's a Kuma artist based in Brisbane. He does a lot of amazing work, the technology of which I don't quite understand, but he does a lot with virtual reality,
It's more in the gaming space.
Yeah, which
Not
is quite
a space
incredible.
I'm familiar with.
But he's done a lot of similar projects in other places around the country, basically recreating what the landscape would have looked like pre-contact. So this work is called Virtual Naarm 1834, and it's meant to represent the land that the university is on and then kind of the surrounding Wurundjeri country the day before colonisation. So thinking about flora and fauna that would have been here at that time, Wurundjeri communities and what they would have actually been doing here. So that's where that consultation was really key. So what did Wurundjeri actually want to depict? What stories did they want to be captured? What people, what were they doing? All of that. So yeah, we worked for, it was a couple of years with them to kind of go through that process so that we could tell this story how they wanted it to be told, really.
And it follows the kind of waterways across Melbourne to get us kind of to where we are on Parkville campus. Yeah, so he uses historical maps and records as well as that consultation. Yeah, so it has been a really good grounding piece, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's shown alongside this possum skin cloak, which you can't, oh, you can see it a little bit, by Mandy Nicholson, which is in the university's collection. That's a very practical piece that's used by Mandy Nicholson every year and others. We found out Marcia Langton has worn it before as well, particularly in graduation ceremonies here at the university. So it was positioned here, obviously thinking about Wurundjeri and the work that Brett was creating to kind of acknowledge them, both as, you know, having lived here, continuing to live here and the connections they have to place, but also the things that they have created and used for thousands of years and continue to create now and into the future, obviously, as well.
And with Mandy's work, it's one of those pieces that's come about of a revival of a practice that perhaps was like sleeping or paused for, you know, 100 or more years, and it's through access to particular museum collections where there's only a few that we know of, where there's possum skin cloaks that she and others like Vicky Cousins have been able to revitalise this practice and really take it to quite a different place now again. So even that practice of reawakening culture on occasion was important to kind of start with, yeah.
So that's, the first space as you enter the building. You then come around through to what was the old entrance and where the old, front desk used to be. We call that the atrium space now, which is celebration of women artists. So we knew, thinking about, history, we wanted to kind of tackle that on the ground floor, acknowledge both where we were, but the history of what's happened in Australia. But, so there's 2 galleries which address that, but we had this kind of space in the middle of both of those that we weren't really sure what we wanted to do with that, how we wanted to use it. But one of the key things for Marcia when we were doing all of this work to acquire new amazing creations for the university's collection was to acquire the work of women artists. So when Marcia was going through the collection, thinking about this exhibition and what it was going to be, she very quickly realised that there were no works by named Indigenous women in the collection at all. There are some works in one of the rooms up on level 1 of the Potter, which are woven works called Barty from Arnhem Land, which we know women would have woven, would have created, but their names weren't recorded when they were collected.
So that was principally during that time when the works are collected by anthropologists.
So 1940s.
So perhaps, or, they had a kind of ranking of what they thought was important or not. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's our inheritance to deal with.
So we knew there were works by women, they just weren't named. So in order to kind of, honour them, we acquired all of these new woven works. And this is just some of them. There are others in this space as well, but these are all contemporary works.
And geographically.
Yeah, this wall is from Arnhem Land, so from west to east, roughly grouped by art centres. So thinking about the different art centres, the different access to materials that they'll have, so the different dyeing practices, the different forms that those weavings will take, if they're woven versus if they're twined, all of those things. And that's just, one very, very small part of the country, one practice. Many other iterations of this obviously exist beyond what we've acquired and are able to show here, but one way to kind of showcase so much diversity from, one practice from one part of the country. And thinking about weaving kind of more broadly as well, because it's something that exists across Australia, across communities for different purposes and functions. We were able to commission 2 works as well, which fit really nicely into this idea of celebrating women and thinking about weavings. So Lorraine Connolly-Northey, work on the left, amazing Wiradjuri artist who does a lot with, found kind of metals and discarded materials. A lot with, things like barbed wire, but we knew we were going to have a lot of kids in the show, so we...
Springs from old mattresses and stuff.
So she's created these narbong or bush bags as her kind of way to think about weaving, and they're quite large too.
Yeah, can you get the scale? They're like the kind of human height. Yeah.
So yeah, they're amazing to have. And then the other commission in this space is by Sandra Aitken, Gunditjmara artist based down in Warrnambool. Does a lot with the Budge Brim precinct at Lake Condah, thinking about the use of eel traps historically and the very extensive aquaculture kind of systems and networks that were in place there, which have now been revamped thanks to the World Heritage listing. But yeah, and the story about, you know, her grandmother, you know, and kind of like you were saying, when those practices, you know, weren't happening for a time, when they were sleeping, and then kind of revamping those in the present. So yeah, she tells an amazing story about this work, and that's been acquired into our collection as well, that eel trap.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So with this kind of technology around weaving, both the artistic creative practice and technology and knowledge is actually a subject we're going to come back to in a future show. So I just thought to note while we do that this is not just a one-off, what we're doing with this show at the Potter. Like these, some of the themes in this show will keep coming back in future shows.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a really important zone. It's a space of obviously celebration, but alongside it are these historical galleries. So it was really important for us thinking about how we were anticipating audiences like yourselves coming through the building. We wanted people to obviously go into those galleries, but then they'd have to come back through this space in order to get up to level 1. So that's a way for people to kind of reset, kind of repause, think about, you know, all of the celebration that needs to be had and the appreciation for all of these things after they've kind of confronted the histories of what's happened across the country as well. So yeah, the next space which you'd encounter, how we envisioned you encountering it, if you go through the way that we've had it mapped in our minds, is art from Victoria and Lutruwita or Tasmania. So we really started that after talking to the Wurundjeri Council and Uncle Bill Nicholson with the acknowledgement of William Barak. So that's the image on the left. So thinking about, yeah, him, his role as a Narangita and his creative practice. The fact that he was creating again and kind of capturing these important ceremonies that were taking place, people wearing possum skin cloaks at a time when they weren't able to actually, you know, do those ceremonies or speak language necessarily.
So he was living at Corranderk at that time in the Yarra Valley and would have been, yeah, forbidden from doing that kind of work, but still spent a lot of time capturing it in amazing artworks.
Yeah.
And you'll see here that, well, as well as like photographic representations of him and his family, there's also portraits. So the first ground floor galleries are the only galleries that have work by non-Indigenous colonial artists as well as Indigenous artists. And the decision to do that was to also be able to bring in ancestors into the space in the form, I suppose, the visual form that we have access to. It was a big decision, but the key behind that is we've only included anyone who is named and where we could get the cultural permission to do so. Yeah. So those ground floor galleries are actually, there's a lot of portraits in them, so they are really connecting to particularly Victoria, New South Wales and Tasmania ancestors.
And as you said, yeah, a lot of people who've come in and seen these portraits, some of them, you know, have never been shown before or never really circulated, so people are coming and encountering, you know, their ancestors for the first time in some instances. And
the thing with this like very distinguished portrait of Barak by
Victor Dupuri,
who family still own that portrait. They're in the Yarra Valley, the winemakers, landowners at that time. In this space, one of the key conversations is also about the conversations between artists. So even in the most adverse of circumstances, Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists were having correspondences and relationships with each other and, you know, sharing work, sketching each other, painting each other at 1880s, like pretty tough time in particularly Indigenous Victorian history. So it's quite interesting that that took place in parallel with everything else that was going on.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, one half of the room, roughly, this is just one wall in there, looks at art from Victoria, so thinking about other moments of artist exchange, thinking about other communities across Victoria and the things that they were creating and had been creating for thousands of years. And then the other half looks at art from Lutruwita or Tasmania. And the work in the middle here is one of the other commissions for the show by Julie Goff, an amazing Palawa artist. this came about, we essentially invited her to do a commission for the show in response to the university's collections. She saw the busts of Truganini and Waradi in the Medical History Museum collection here at the university.
You can just kind of see them in the stillage.
In
We
the
can't
crates.
see in this image, but
Yeah, makes sense in person when you when you go in there. But yeah, these are, you know, her ancestors. She works at TMAG. They have copies of the same busts down there, and there are many others that exist around the world. So she decided she wanted to respond to these busts. She's shown them in their storage crates, so how they are when they're at the Medical History Museum, not on display, and then gone around to everywhere she can find a copy of these busts that exist of Truganini and Waradi and filmed them in situ. So if they're on display, if they're in storage, thinking about the role of museums, especially in the past, but you know, in the present as well and into the future, in the collection of these things. These ancestors, you know, sat for one set of busts in 1835 and 1836 for Benjamin Law. Very likely, you know, didn't anticipate or certainly weren't consulted about the many, many copies that were then made thereafter and sent around the world. So the fact that they're very lifelike as well, should they be back on country with communities of origin, you know, with people who are related to them, rather than sitting, you know, in places like the British Museum, for example, they have a set over there.
or lots of institutions may not even really know what they are or their significance. So it's an ongoing project for Julie. Like, she's been overseas this year doing more with it. So it's like we've got the first iteration within the show, but exciting to think. I think it's like, it's an epic project. It's going to have, a bigger life than us, hopefully.
Because there'll be many other copies of these busts in private collections, for example, that, you know, people don't know about. But hopefully through this process, you know, we've had a few hot tips for where some other ones are. So Julie has been passed on that information so she can go out and do this other filming and create some other, iteration of this work in the future. But yeah, really amazing to have that there, thinking about everything that's happened, obviously, for her and her community, the acknowledging, you know, the Black Wars and everything that happened thereafter in Lutruwita, Tasmania. So yeah, some really, really important other works in here as well, which you can't quite see, but works connecting both Victoria and Tasmania as well. So shared history in terms of, obviously very different, but in terms of contact and everything that happened to Indigenous people and, you know, their forced relocation off of their homelands. And then connection as well historically, so connected by land bridge about 12,000 years ago. So we're acknowledging all of that in this first gallery. Right. The next gallery is then thinking about first encounters and responses, so acknowledging colonisation, the Australian Wars and their aftermath. Thought we would just show this. This is one of the first works that you will see, depending on which way you come into that gallery. But this is called The Dawn of Art. It's in Museums Victoria's collection. This is a collection of drawings that came from inmates of the Fanny Bay Jail. They were collected, brought to Melbourne and put on display here in 1888.
1880, yeah. So got a lot of this work is from a similar period.
Yeah, shown at the Melbourne Bicentennial Exhibition at the Royal Exhibition Building.
Yep.
But this is the first time that we've been able to ascertain that Indigenous people's works has been labelled as art. So such an important moment in, you know, the art history, if we're thinking about it in those terms in Australia. So you'll see, the Dawn of Art there in the middle of that. This was at one point in time in the University of Melbourne's collection before being gifted to Museums Victoria, and hasn't actually been seen a lot of time since then. So the fact that it's here is really, really
And this
amazing.
is part of quite a big series of works. The rest are in the South Australian Museum, I think. Yeah. So on occasion, those other ones have been shown at Art Gallery South Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this, when you see it, even like the whole casing of it, the framing,
Original.
it's quite to what it was.
Yeah.
Hasn't changed much.
Yeah.
And I mean, Shanice, we didn't mention at the start, like, that we do have a kind of warning when people come into this exhibition that's about some of the content, but also about the terminology. And even in this sentence, you know, executed without the aid of master. Like, there's those kind of words appear particularly on the ground floor through lots of things, which kind of goes to that, I suppose, like, colonial mindset. Even when it was giving, it was taking a bit. So it's just, something we do talk to quite a lot when we're in the exhibition.
Which we want people to obviously be aware of and educate themselves about and learn about all the different terminologies and why they are so problematic.
Well, when you look at this, when you're in the space, check out the actual descriptions of the drawings, and like, it's really interesting, and all the works around it are amazing too.
Yeah. And then just another thing to point out in this space, which I'll talk about quickly before we start running out of time.
We're good.
The E. Phillips Fox work on loan from the NGV, kind of facing off, if you will, against the work by Gordon Bennett, which is in the university's collection. Lots of curatorial debates about the E. Phillips Fox and its inclusion in the exhibition, that it ended up in. So, but it is important in juxtaposition with the Gordon Bennett work, thinking about this moment, the landing of Captain Cook, what that point in time, this was made after the fact as well, I should note. So this was made for Federation by an artist not living in Australia. So kind of imagining what this moment actually looked like.
He painted it in London and they sent it out for the Federation exhibition.
So yeah, all of that and the kind of the romanticisation of this moment, despite everything that obviously occurred thereafter. So really important to acknowledge, you know, all of that history, and this representation is really interesting to kind of think about it in that way. Then kind of juxtaposed with the work of Gordon Bennett, which I feel like you talk about really well.
Amazing Indigenous Australian artist who passed away, 2014, very sadly. But this was actually part of a residency they'd done at the Potter, and had looked at some of the archives and the collections, and this is one of our major works in our collection. And you can kind of see whether it's whatever explorer or, you know, coloniser, kind of like drowning because they don't understand how to be on country, they don't know where the water is, they don't know how to survive, and, you know, there's so many things going in it. It's a really good one to look at and spend time with, and we use it a lot in teaching.
Yeah, and both of these are quite large too, so you definitely can't
and it's nice that they're a kind of face-off to each other.
But there's thinking about the Australian Wars as well and massacres that happened. That's acknowledged in this gallery space. Thinking about child removal as well. There's a work that references that. So lots of different things to unpack in the First Encounters gallery. But yeah, again, you have to come back through that celebration of women artists.
Now we're speeding up, sorry. But we do always set the scene pretty strongly down here.
Yeah, because the ground floor is really important. A lot of people, I think come in, see the ground floor, and then obviously need time, and then come back, you know, for future visits to look at the other floors, which I highly recommend you do anyway, because we're only open for another month and there's so much to see and so much to read. So. But yeah, when you do get up to level one of the first spaces you'll look at is this, Art from Arnhem Land. So this is where a lot of the university's work is on display, or the works in our care are on display. We kind of wanted to do a little bit thinking about the history and acknowledging the chronology with bark painting in this space though. So the work at the back on the black wall are works on loan from Museums Victoria, and that's thinking about how, you know, bark paintings were commissioned in Arnhem Land from, you know, the early 1910s by people like Baldwin Spencer, who was working here at the university. In West Arnhem Land, these works were commissioned, brought back to Melbourne as kind of examples of, you know, especially the works at the back, what would have been in the rock art and on wet season shelters in West Arnhem Land. So all these paintings that people had done, we're continuing to do. Well,
as far as we understand, they're like one of the first examples of things that were then made portable and could be traded and shared and ended up in an institutional kind of setting.
Yeah, so that started in West Arnhem Land and then moved to East and the other side and Groot Island in Arnhem Land. But yeah, the Donald Thompson collection, the largest collection that we care for at the University of Melbourne. Lots of bark paintings and bati, which is the basket that I was saying. We know women would have made those, but their names weren't recorded. You can see it just in the corner. So a selection of those on display there as well. So lots of community consultation, again, for these works. They were collected in the 30s and 40s on long-term loan to Museums Victoria from when they were gifted to us. So that's the 1970s, and only recalled and brought back to the university last year. So
and
lots of work.
With the earlier works, how they're more connected to rock art sites, theoretically.
Yeah.
These ones are body designs, so would have been through men's ceremony that then are transferred to the barks. So that's also like a really key kind of moment of that transition.
So showing that, in this gallery as well through, a series of works from different communities across Arnhem Land that Donald Thompson had visited, commissioned these works, collected these works and brought them back to Melbourne. So lots of work telling communities that we had these works, obviously getting their approvals to display them in this way and all of that.
And you'll see an empty vitrine when you're there because there was one of the bati, that when we had on display the opening weekend, and when community were there, they were like, maybe that's not something that should actually be seen by people, general people. So it's been removed, and that's with all our work, that's going to be an ongoing discussion and negotiation because, you know, we're kind of learning as we're doing. So we had consulted, but the other people thought different things. So
but that's,
we're
important for us to
very
be
responsive.
So similarly, this is work from the Leonard Adam collection, another collection we care for here at the University of Melbourne, from Good Island. So thinking about the bark painting tradition from that part of Arnhem Land, which, a little bit different history, slightly different time, but...
Yeah, a bit similar time.
Yeah, late 40s. Yeah.
But connecting a lot to stories of Macassan trading, so from Macassan, Indonesia to Australia, the sea cucumbers, the kind of vessels, the plants and sharing of knowledge between communities.
And acknowledging that that happened well before
for
the
hundreds
British
of years.
arrived. So that hundreds of years and that very extensive network that existed is on display in that gallery. We then move into the art of the Central and Western Desert.
Janice's favourite
My
space.
favourite room. I could do a whole presentation just on this room tonight, but we won't. We're going to run out of time. But the curation of this, it was really, really important, I think for all of us, but especially for me, that there be no kind of inner walls in this space. Thinking about stereotypes about what Aboriginal art is. Questions like where is the ochre, where are the dots, they often come from art from this region. So having it all kind of viewable in the open as you kind of walk in was really important. So you'll be able to see everything, walk around and look at things and, compare works from artists from different parts of the Northern Territory, South Australia, Western Australia represented. And the big work at the end is one of the commissions as well, Betty Muffley and Marinka Burton, two Nunkari or Aboriginal healers from the APY lands. Such an important work, which is now in our collection. It's also, it's 3 by 5 metres, so it's quite large. You can't quite tell in the photo, but it's lifelike. It had to be stretched in that room as well because it's too big to fit in our lift. So, fun fact, a bit of behind the scenes for you all. But amazing works thinking about the different movements, a lot of which happened in this region. So thinking about Albert Namatjira and obviously the legacy that he had on art. Thinking about Papunya in the 1970s and how that really transformed the way that people were creating in the desert and selling their works and showing them, which kind of, such an important moment in Australian art history. And then the work of women as well, who didn't really come until, the 90s in this part of the country.
Into their own right. So they might have been working with their partners, but not necessarily acknowledged.
Yeah, not for this kind of commercial sense. So and then the last space on, where are we, level 1, was one of the most important spaces to Marcia for this exhibition, looking at scientific racism here at the University of Melbourne. So coming back to the truth-telling and acknowledging our history here at the university. We did a lot of work with the Archives and Medical History Museum in the, couple of years we were planning this show to kind of gather as many documents as we can to kind of highlight who the kind of key eugenicists were that were working here and their role in the collection of ancestors and this kind of study of eugenics, so trying to prove that Indigenous people were biologically different and inferior. A practice that happened across Victoria, but other parts of the country as well, until the middle of the 20th century. So the same time people like Donald Thompson were commissioning artists and bringing works back from Arnhem Land, this was happening here at the university. So we've got all of those archival documents on display. There's a video where Marcia Langton's talking about this, a video which is also on our website, so you can watch that as many times as you feel the need at home. But also having that work surrounded by amazing works by Indigenous artists that kind of speak back to this, because again, it's often a lot of works about us without our own kind of voices and histories into the mix. So having amazing works like the one on the left, which is Brooke Andrew, and then the series of paintings by Julie Dowling in this room, Judy Watson and Ioane Scarce as well.
Yeah.
You can't see. But very important. This space has a red door at the front and a content warning outside, which I encourage you to read before you go in. But I think it's important that you definitely go into this space at some point if you haven't been in there already.
So the way we designed it, which Shanisa was really involved in very closely, was also so it's absolutely connected, but also we just didn't want that content to infiltrate the other artists' work, so it's more about respect for that rather than saying this isn't equally as important, because it is.
Yeah, and we recommend no one under the age of 18 goes into this space as well, just because of all the topics that they may not quite understand. Yeah. So that's level 1. Moving up to level 2.
Top level.
Yeah, top level, just quickly, before we move into, I think, a Q&A. The first kind of space looks at cultural astronomy, so thinking about different Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists and how they create amazing works of art that reference, different stories. the Seven Sisters kind of being one of them. So that's the big jumpy desert weavers installation you can see in the middle of this image. But this is a story that exists across the country, many different versions of this that exist and, you know, have been told for thousands of years. They're just being shared with us in all these different ways. So through painting, through these amazing kind of sculptural works. So we've highlighted a number of those. Thinking about the Torres Strait as well and life up there, again, kind of pre-contact, but how that's kind of shared with us now with contemporary mediums. Amazing work, by Gail Marbo of bamboo kind of constellations, which would have been at some point hand-sized, little maps for kind of navigating using the constellations. But yeah, an amazing suite of artists kind of brought together in this space. The next space is thinking about art from the Kimberley. So again, another kind of really important moment in terms of art history that happened in Australia. Kind of all started with Rover Thomas in the 1970s. So thinking about that introduction of painting, which started, you know, for ceremonies in Warman or Turkey Creek, but then kind of the commercial aspect kind of came in a little bit later once people had seen these painted boards that they were doing, and that kind of sparked this whole movement and celebration of, you know, male and female artists and their amazing works in this space.
And revitalisation of culture via art
Through a
making.
new medium.
Yeah.
So really, really important story. There's a couple of labels in there that really unpack that quite well. And then the last space is in kind of two halves. So we're looking at resistance and innovation in city studios in this image. So thinking about artists like Trevor Nichols, who'd done a lot with the university, creating works of art in cities. So places like Melbourne, often not living on their own country, having to find their own kind of communities and places to connect with other, you know, Indigenous people. Works becoming a lot more kind of overtly political as well. So addressing things such as incarceration, deaths in custody, obviously very relevant when they were made, but even today. So highlighting all of that, thinking about the physical space we wanted to replicate where they would have been made. So warehouse, artist studio is what the physical space is meant to reflect. And then thinking about resistance and innovation in bush studios as well. So amazing artists like Sally Gabori, Ginger Riley, Billy Ben, Ricky Maynard in this space, creating not in huge cities like Melbourne necessarily, but creating on their own, whether in art centres or just with communities, but kind of getting rid of that urban versus, you know, rural, remote, metropolitan, all of those kind of labels. It doesn't matter where you live, you can still be connected to one another, to communities. And ultimately the whole exhibition's trying to say that we've been storytellers for thousands of years, we've created for thousands and thousands of years as well. We're just, you know, sharing those in as many different ways as we can and want to in the present.
Beautiful.
Yeah, which is really great.
That's your speedy view through, everyone.
Speedy second half.
Thank you, Shanice. We've probably got a few. Have we got a few minutes?
Sorry, and also.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Little plug at the end.
Yeah, do the plug.
Also on, if you haven't seen or heard about this, there's some brochures over at the Potter about this, which you can pick up and take home with you. But we have a complimentary exhibition on at Trinity College.
Curated by Shanice.
Which really supports obviously all of the work in 65,000 years. So continuing that story, thinking about some other kind of artists or regions that aren't captured in the Potter, but thinking about how, you know, kind of one generation of artists would create things their own way, and then the next generation would kind of create things in a different way. Sometimes different, sometimes the same, but taking their own kind of ownership.
Yeah, and having agency and doing
to move in whatever direction that they see fit. So thinking about, artists like Albert Namatjira, who influenced the watercolour school in Alice Springs, and Vanessa Inkamal is now painting with watercolour but on recycled road signs. So it's called Our Way, Trinity College. It's on till the end of next month as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We did go pretty speedy, but we have to with such a big show. Thank you very much.